this is me. You're probably wondering, how did we get here? So let me take you back. The year was 2005, Batman Begins was in cinemas, Fernando Alonso won the F1, and it was the first time the world saw the Pagani Zonda F. It was unlike anything anyone had ever seen or heard before. It had equal length headers, Mercedes V12, everything was right in the world. From that moment on, I put pencil to paper and sketched my dream supercar. It would have sweeping lines, big exhausts and rocket launchers. Okay, maybe not rocket launchers. With a perfect masterpiece in hand, I then stormed away for a time when I was older. By then I'd have the skills, knowledge and unlimited ice cream to build my dream supercar. Then, 15 Zonda models later, and an empty bank balance, I was ready to buy my Zonda. I was ready to tackle the world and build my dream supercar. After some research, I discovered there was a Mercedes that had the same base engine block that was used in the very first Zonda. So that's the 6 litre V12. That was Mercedes engine, not using the S600s and the SL600s. I began my search very early on, and then I finally found one. I fixed it up, I got it running, and I used this as my perfect donor car. This engine hadn't started up in over 11 years. So my first priority was to make sure the cylinder walls were lubricated before I even attempted to turn the engine over. So the first steps was to take out the spark plugs, and then I put oil down the cylinders every day for a week so that all the piston rings could re-soak in oil. Next I investigated the fuel system. On this car it has 2 fuel pumps that are sequential. So I tested the fuel pump off the car with a 12-volt battery. As we can see, one of the fuel pumps is working good, the other one isn't working at all. I then replaced the fuel pump and checked the fuel pressure. So then I disconnected the pipes from the fuel rail and purged out the old fuel. During the fuel pump removal, I also emptied the tank to make sure none of the old fuel made its way through the injectors. So now we've confirmed we've got good fuel and good fuel pressure. I took each spark plug out, placed it on the end of the lead and grounded the other end of the plug. So when cranking the engine for a couple of seconds, you can see if there's a spark or no spark. I repeated this process over every cylinder. I discovered that one of the banks was down, so 6 cylinders were not sparking at all. I traced this back to the coil pack. I discovered the coil pack was actually unplugged, so that was quite a lucky fix. Now we know the car has good spark and it has good fuel and good fuel pressure. I then tested the throttle bodies. They're electronic. I did this by turning on the ignition and pressing the pedal and checking both sides, and both the motors moved, so that confirmed we're good. We have air, spark and fuel. On further inspection, I also discovered the wiring harness for the car was bad. This is quite common with 90s Mercedes. They used a biodegradable wire harness. It didn't last as long as it was designed to. I managed to repair the wire harness. At this stage I also discovered I was missing an ECU for the car. This was quite scary because I thought it might need reprogramming to the car and it'd be very difficult to do. So I reached out to a Mercedes expert.
Hello, Victor here, restoringmercedes.com.
Thankfully he gave me the information I needed and told me that I just need to get another module of a very specific type and I was good to go. So with all that work done, we're ready to test the engine for the first time. stage, I was very happy the engine was running. And the rest is history. I finally built my dream supercar. So this is me, full of tea and motivation, thinking of equal length headers and independent throttle bodies. So that's enough with the recap, on with the build. So we have a glorious V12, subframes and a gap big enough to fit the moon. Now let's talk about the chassis, how we're going to accomplish this. So the material of choice is DRM tube and 2-2 twill carbon fibre. First we start with the steel, as this will hold all the critical mounting points. So there's many ways to make a chassis. We can buy individual tube and bend it. It takes 10,000 hours to get the right bend on each part, or we can hire a company to make it and light cash on fire. I then discovered a company in the UK that would meet me halfway. They would cut, bend, notch and weld tubes together, but then they'd also sell me straight lengths of tubes so I could bend bits myself and do some of the work myself. And they would do all of this for less than the price of a decent TIG welding machine. It was decided they would do half the work and I would do the rest. They would do most of the work and I would do the rest. This route also gave me a chassis manufacturer to write on my paperwork. I then sent off my design, got fast approval, and we were cooking on gas. I could spend my time taking apart the donor car and building the chassis at the same time. A few weeks later, with many wires disconnected, it was time to take delivery of my dream supercar. All I had to do was put it together. So, like a master flat pack assembler, I started on my project, started bolting pieces together. So this is the front of the car. You see that bar that goes all the way around. Coming up, I've got the windscreen stay. So this is the area we're looking at. So I've got this arrangement of tubes with slots. This allows me to adjust the front of the car wherever it needs to be positioned. So there's going to be a bar across the back. This will make more structure to ensure it's a really solid mounting point. There's going to be additional tie rods on each side to help lock this in. So this is all seamless tube to ensure it's nice and strong. There can be inserts inside the tube made of solid steel. This stops the tube from squishing. So there you can see I've got the insert with a thread, that's M16. I just need to drill a hole in here. There's also going to be steel in the lower parts, so I've made these. I just need to drill a hole in the middle. those M16 threads again, they're going to get the top and the bottom. So by turning each one, I'll be able to adjust each pipe forward and back. This will get me somewhere in the close range, and then the final alignment will do the last bit. So this is the front of the car. You see the upper wishbone hidden up there. We've got the lower wishbone here, and the spring fits where that piece of wood is. So around the front you can see the assembly we just looked at in more detail. There's still some work to do. So here's the windscreen stay in one piece. This is quite challenging to draw in CAD. At the bottom we've got one single hoop again to give lots of strength, and the bolts go through the subframe at the back. So there's the rear of the car, looking quite nice. So you can see where them tyres come down to. We've also got multi-link suspension on the rear of this car. In the middle you can see where I've extended the subframe to get the right wheel stance. This gives better handling. So this is the front of the car. You can see we've got the S600 front frame rail still attached. So that's going to get replaced with a tube frame piece made out of the same drawn-up manual tube. So that's going to be bent and come down here. So the reason that's still here is because it's holding the upper wishbone that's currently on here, as well as you've got the suspension point up here, so that's all going to be replaced at a later date. This bar is currently holding the towers bar because these front subframe mounts are rubber mounted, so there is a bit of squish. So on the S600 we've got double wishbones on the front and we've got multi-link on the rear, so it's very similar to how the Ferrari 458 is set up. So for now we're going to be using all the original suspension components. I'm going to repackage them in a way that works, and then at a later stage we can change it for whatever we want. If we want to do push rod or whatever kind of setup, nothing we do now has to be permanent. So here's the chassis. I'm currently sat where the engine will be. The front of the car's that way, subframe's here. Got this tie rod here which stops the rear end from folding up, so that gives it good triangulation. So we've got hind joints on each end. One side's the right hand thread, the other side's the left hand. So this whole thing can be spun to extend or retract the bar. The top side, I've got steel plates that I've made where M16 bolts are going to go through. There's going to be steel bushings to stop the tubes from crushing on each end. So I need to drill through the chassis on the top and drill through the subframe at the bottom side. You can see on this side. This is a temporary support, so it'll be just in place while this is being fabricated. These are M16 joiners that I've machined down to put inside this DOM tube, so that's roll cage chassis tube. I'm debating covering that with carbon fibre at a later stage. So these were just temporary, but I think they're probably good enough to be on the car for a while. I was going to make them out of titanium, but these steel ones are good enough for now to get the geometry set up. The bottom I've got plates to hold the lower hind joints. 3 bolts that are going to be drilled through the subframe, and then another bolt for another hind joint that's going to go down to the gearbox and join back onto the engine support, so that will make a really strong shape. Then on this, the lower point and the one that joins onto the chassis, the subframe. So these 2 bars here are temporary. They're just stopping the front end from folding up until I've made the final supports. So once this is replaced with a nice bent tube and the dash bars put in place, there'll also be some triangulation from this lower point to this point up here. That'll have some adjustability, but that'll do that job, and then these can go. My windscreen surround and my window can go in, which I've already made a good head start on. So that's carbon fibre that's been laid around a Load-Sleeze windscreen. So that fits this contour of this front hoop bar. That's why we've got these multiple steps. So that's the steel part, and then we're going to have carbon fibre in between all these tubes. So that's why there's no cross bracing on any of these pipes, because they're going to be carbon fibre door sills, back panels. This is temporary. This is going to be replaced with 25mm roll cage tube, the same again. So we're going to probably put a small bend in there and re-weld that to these two sides. So for the carbon tub, I'm going to use flat panel sheet carbon, and then I'm going to bond it onto here. So I'm going to cut the shapes and then bond it on. So I'll be painting this with a textured paint so that it will stick, and then I'll tape over the sections in between the pieces of the panel with a sheet of the carbon. So we'll have a side piece, a bottom piece, a back piece, and then I'll carbon tape in between them all, and then we'll just keep building the layers up until it's nice and rigid, and that will ultimately stop these bits from flexing, make it a really rigid tub. So the tub will go all the way to where the feet sit. So that's going to be all Kevlar down that end where the feet are going to be. Down this end it's all going to be carbon fibre. So for the body of the car, polystyrene is going to be used to make a whole block over the car, so that will give it the shape. And then I'll do multiple layers of carbon fibre over the top. And then I'll cut the seams, like the door seams, with an angle grinder, so that'll make a really nice seam. It means I'm not stuck with loads of moulds that I'm not going to necessarily use. If I do happen to crack apart, I'll just repair it. I spent many hours machining steel bushings, various widgets and a little welding, and here we are. A rolling chassis, a milestone for any build, a sign that we have something that resembles a car. So if you found my story interesting and you want to see the screaming V12 come to life, hit that subscribe button. Let me know in the comments if you enjoyed this episode.